Hello and welcome back to Indus News. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan talking to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and they've discussed the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. This was the third phone call over the crisis between Khan and the Saudi Crown Prince in the last 3 weeks. Khan told Mohammed bin Salman about the worsening crisis in the occupied valley, which has been under a lockdown for the past 30 days. Earlier, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's decision of revoking occupied Kashmir status is a regional security risk. The Foreign Minister said in addition to Muslims, every minority is unsafe in Hindutva-ruled India. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Adil Al-Jubair is expected to visit Pakistan tomorrow to discuss the situation in Kashmir. And staying with Kashmir, and the month-long lockdown enforced by Indian forces has triggered food shortages. Kashmiris told undercover journalists the curfew has created a medical emergency. The valley has now been cut off from the world for 30 days. Millions of residents in Indian-occupied Kashmir are facing an acute shortage of food, medicine and medical treatment. Indian occupation forces have arrested 11,000 Kashmiri politicians, activists, journalists and civilians in less than a month. India's crushing curfew and communications blackout has now entered its 30th day. The clampdown has suspended all activity in the valley and cut off people from the rest of the world. More in this report.
In the disputed region, which is currently under lockdown by the Indian government, simple communication is a major struggle. Journalists face a challenge to file even basic reports. India's Supreme Court has ordered the government to respond to a legal challenge calling for an end to the blackout to allow for media reporting. Until then, the only reliable way to get back in touch with the world is to fly out of Kashmir.
In Afghanistan, 16 civilians have been killed and over 100 others injured in a blast near the Green Village complex in Kabul. The Taliban have claimed responsibility, saying they were targeting foreign troops. The Interior Ministry says the blast was caused by a tractor packed with explosives parked beside one of the complex's walls. The Taliban say the attack was coordinated because it was followed by fighters entering the complex to fight Afghanistani forces. Iran has ruled out direct negotiations with the United States. Addressing the country's parliament, President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran will counter US pressure with active diplomacy instead of talks. The president says Tehran's strategy is to hold on to revolutionary patience and rationality. Rouhani said Washington set out to isolate Tehran, but its effective diplomacy is isolating the US over the nuclear deal. Earlier, US President Donald Trump offered to meet Iranian leaders and hold bilateral talks with no preconditions. Iran says it will hold joint military exercises with Russia in the Indian Ocean, but Foreign Minister Javad Zarif did not say when the drills will be held. During his visit to Russia, Zarif said several other countries may join the exercises. Iran's foreign minister said these exercises are not aimed at third countries, but to maintain regional security. He said Tehran and Moscow have a similar vision on the security in the Persian Gulf. Zarif said the Tehran-Moscow security plan is based on cooperation, where the American idea of security is aggression and hostility. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah has threatened Israel with missile strikes following the recent clashes on the border with Lebanon. He says Hezbollah will attack targets along the border and deep inside Israel if it launched more cross-border attacks. In a televised speech, Nasrallah said the flare-up launched a new phase in which Hezbollah no longer has red lines. He said Hezbollah fighters in southern Lebanon would focus on intruding on Israeli drones. The EU has denied the UK's claim that Brussels is thinking of a revised Brexit deal proposed by Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government. The European Commission says the deal agreed by former Prime Minister Theresa May is still the best solution for an orderly Brexit. An EU Commission spokesperson says a no-deal Brexit is a very likely scenario. She contradicted the UK's claim that it shared an alternative to the Irish backstop with Brussels. Earlier, the British government said it received a positive EU response to its revised Brexit plan. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said the two sides were thrashing through the details of an amended deal. Meanwhile, the opposition Labour Party says it wants fresh elections, but only if a no-deal Brexit is blocked first. In China, 8 primary school children have been stabbed to death in a knife attack in central Hubei province. Police have arrested a 40-year-old male suspected at the crime scene. Police say 2 of the survivors are being treated for life-threatening injuries. The attack took place on the first day of school in the Chaoyangpao village of Hubei. China's state media says the authorities have not yet shared the motive for the attack. It says the suspect is an ex-convict who was released in May after serving an 8-year sentence. Now, 25 bodies have been recovered after a scuba diving vessel sank after catching fire off an island in Southern California. The U.S. Coast Guard says a search operation is underway to look for 9 other missing passengers. The 75-foot commercial diving boat erupted in flames near the shoreline of Santa Cruz. Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown said 39 people were on board when the fire broke out. 5 of the diving boat's crew escaped the blaze. The authorities say the cause of the fire is still yet unknown.
We understand the tremendous burden that they are under right now as they wait to determine exactly what happened and what condition and situation their loved ones are in. We will be working diligently to try to get them as much information as possible as soon as possible.
In Mexico, 5 people have been killed after a gunman attacked a bus station in the city of Cuernavaca. Morelos state authorities say the shooting was targeted and part of a turf war between rival drug cartels. Officials say the gunman killed 3 passengers on a bus, 1 in the waiting area and another in a bathroom. Authorities say Morelos is the epicenter of a turf war between at least 5 groups. Over 250,000 people have been killed in drug wars since 2006. Mexico's army has been fighting the cartels for 13 years. 5 people have died after Hurricane Durian hit the Bahamas. In the meantime, mass evacuations are underway in nearby states on the U.S. East Coast. The International Red Cross says some 13,000 houses have been damaged or destroyed in the Bahamas. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says Durian has weakened to a Category 3 as it pummeled the island chain with wind speeds of over 200 kilometers an hour. Bahamian officials say the Abacos Islands are under water after being inundated by storm surges as high as 23 feet. Prime Minister Hubert Minnis says the hurricane is a tragedy for the archipelago.
The Royal Bahamas Police Force has confirmed that there are 5 deaths in Abaco. We are in the midst of a historic tragedy in parts of northern Bahamas. Our mission and focus now is search, rescue, and recovery.
Over 100 migrants have disembarked in Sicily after Italian police seized a German rescue ship. The vessel's captain Klaus-Peter Reich says Mediterranean storms forced him to seek shelter in the port of Pozzallo. The vessel Eleanor waited 8 days to be granted safe harbour by the Italian authorities. The Italian Coast Guard allowed the 31 remaining migrants aboard the ship to use another rescue ship to land on the island of Lampedusa. In the meantime, the Spanish Coast Guard rescued 200 North African migrants attempting a dangerous crossing. Elsewhere, the Libyan Navy also picked up more than 100 migrants off the country's western coast. Now, Brazil has reached out to Norway and Germany for help in putting out thousands of wildfires in the Amazon rainforest. The 2 European states discontinued financial aid to Brazil over deforestation just last month. The move did not go down well with President Jair Bolsonaro, but Environment Minister Ricardo Salles says talks on the resumption of aid are progressing. The Bolsonaro administration earlier admitted it does not have the resources to put out the fires. Indigenous tribes living deep within the Amazon are facing an existential crisis. The choking smoke is also causing breathing disorders among the Amazon's children. Well, we'll be back with more news and more stories after this short break. Hello and welcome back to Indus News. Now, authorities in Bolivia continue to struggle to contain the ongoing wildfires, which have decimated at least 1 million hectares of forest land. The flames leave a desolate landscape in their wake, with strewn burnt trees and the bodies of animals who perished in the blaze. More in this report.
The Chiquita dry forest's flora and fauna have suffered tremendous losses in the Bolivian wildfires. What's left behind seems like a vision of the apocalypse. One can also see the bodies of dead peccaries, rabbits and snakes in the blackened earth.
The fire is very harmful for local ecosystems because the animals which are dying here are all endangered. At this rate, soon these animals will be lost forever. For example, only one jaguar has been rescued from the area since the fire started.
2,000 firefighters and the military are working together to contain the blaze, but a significant amount of damage has already been done.
Firefighters are being deployed daily to the area affected by the fires. An intensive search is in place to try and locate animals that need help and to transport them to the center.
Environmentalists and locals blame Bolivian President Evo Morales for the disaster. They accuse him of passing legislation that encourages slash and burn farming. The Morales government says it is dry weather and strong winds that are to blame.
Bangladesh has suspended mobile phone services for the 1 million Rohingyas living in refugee camps in the Cox's Bazar. The move follows the killing of a fourth Rohingya accused of murdering a ruling party politician last month. Bangladesh's telecommunication authority says mobile operators have been given a week to implement the ban. Rohingya leaders say the mobile services ban will disrupt communications between refugee camps. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia laid down their arms in 2016, but its former members are still far from leading normal civilian lives. More in this report.
The 5-decade-long conflict, which claimed the lives of almost 300,000 people, came to an end when the rebels signed a peace deal. That deal was signed in 2016 with former President Juan Manuel Santos. The guerrillas agreed to disarm in return for promises of reintegration into society, economic benefits, and political representation in Congress. But many still fear for their lives and are concerned the present government isn't doing enough for their reintegration into society.
La preocupación más grande es
the greatest concern is for life, to guarantee lives because they're killing people not just in reintegration process but also hundreds of social activists. People fighting for their rights, fighting for their reidentifications, and that is why they're seen as targets. In second place, the implementation of the peace agreement that needs to have a guarantee to life.
Y en segundo lugar,
Current President Ivan Duque has opposed many aspects of the peace deal and unsuccessfully tried to make amendments via Congress. He has asked for tougher punishments for ex-rebels who committed war crimes. Some 14,000 ex-guerrillas are in the reincorporation process, with a quarter living in 24 reintegration camps. The UN says 137 ex-combatants have been killed since the deal was signed, leaving many afraid for their lives outside the camps. UN figures show just 10% of ex-guerrillas have been granted credit for farming and development projects.
One starts to lose faith in the credibility of the peace process from the state. I have faith in the decisions that were taken at the beginning, the fight for peace, to find a way to build a stable and durable peace.
A dissident movement is another growing concern. A group of former rebels announced a new offensive in late August as a reaction to failures in the peace process. The government says it will extend a monthly $200 stipend to ex-combatants until December 31st. But this could be too little, too late.
The United Nations has condemned rising violence across Nigeria and the lack of accountability for perpetrators. The UN Special Rapporteur Agnes Kalamard says Nigeria needs to take urgent action to end the violence. Presenting her findings in Abuja, Kalamard said Nigeria is a pressure cooker of internal conflict. She said the country requires change in its judiciary, police and military for people to stop resorting to violence. Kalamard said Nigeria's failure to address the situation could destabilize other West African countries. Nigeria is currently facing multiple conflicts, including tribal wars and attacks by the terrorist group Boko Haram. Now, animals living in a South Korean zoo are being treated to some special dishes or fruit to celebrate the upcoming Thanksgiving holidays. Chuseok is a 3-day holiday celebrated traditionally by Koreans. More in this report.
Chuseok, aka the Korean Thanksgiving Day, is among the most important festive holidays of the year. To celebrate, zookeepers at the Everland Amusement Park in Yongin are preparing traditional Korean plates.
Because the panda is eating that delicious fruit, I want to eat that fruit on Thanksgiving Day too.
Koreans observe the traditional harvest festival called Chuseok by visiting their ancestral hometowns and sharing traditional food. Everland is no different. These traditional plates called gyujolpan are served with fruits like bananas, apples and tomatoes for red pandas, ring-tailed lemurs and elephants.
In celebration of Thanksgiving, we prepared this to spend some fun time with the animals living in the zoo. We've prepared more special ways to feed the animals, such as gujolpan and bananas in the hay.
Korea isn't the only country to celebrate the harvest season with festivities. China, the United States and Argentina celebrate their holidays during different times of the year. For Koreans, the annual holiday, which has been marked on August the 15th of the lunar calendar, will fall on September the 13th this year.
Cabo Delgado in the north of Mozambique is one of the country's poorest regions. It's also the site of a little-known insurgency group that has been sowing terror for close to 2 years. More in this report.
Burnt-out houses, food supplies reduced to ash, and villagers left hungry and fearing for their lives. For nearly 2 years now, the residents of the North Mozambican province of Cabo Delgado have been living in fear of attacks.
They came out of nowhere and burnt my house. Now we live with nothing. We have nothing left. We live like this now.
The attacks are unclaimed, and those who carry them out remain largely unidentified.
I don't know who they were. It was night, but I can tell you that there were a lot of them. There were young people, and women too.
Over 300 people have died in these attacks since October 2017. Many of the survivors have since fled, like Ayuba and his family, to seek refuge with relatives who live elsewhere. 6 people live in this hut, a family wrenched away from the fields that normally provide their livelihood.
I urge the government to do all it can to put a stop to this war, so that we can get back to a normal life.
Local authorities say they are concerned by the situation and are doing all they can to secure the region. But for the Bishop of Pemba, that is not enough. He recently published a letter criticising the government for its lack of action and communication.
Say who they are, show them, and act to stop the attacks. This is our request, that the authorities go deep because the poor are dying.
The Islamic State group claimed 2 of the attacks that have taken place in 2019, but police and security experts doubt the veracity of these claims.
Now, the latest tourist destination in Spain turns out to be a cave. But what sets this one apart from others is that it simulates an underground Martian colony. For a Martian experience on Earth, watch this report. Scientists say if humans are ever to colonize Mars, they'll have to live underground to survive its hostile terrain. But what would such a life be like? You can find out if you visit Astroland's Ares station in Spain's Cantabrian Mountains, where scientists and architects have turned a cave into a Martian colony simulator.
An adventure, honestly, something totally different from what you find outside in your day-to-day, an experience that totally takes you out of your comfort zone. It is another world. You have to adapt, change your mindset, and everything that is ordinary, you have to learn how to do it differently from what you used to do on Earth.
The Ares station isn't something anyone can just jump into. Participants undergo 26 days of online courses, followed by 3 days of intense training before they're allowed to enter the cave. A maximum of 10 people can participate in each mission, which lasts 4 days.
I feel absolutely great. It was a super great experience to be on Mars for 4 days. We were in a cave now, and then we always had those great moments every day where you went on an EVA. It's called an extravehicular activity, where you go out of the habitat where we were sleeping in, and then you were going out in the cave, and it just looked like Mars.
You may not have to wait long if you want to experience actual space travel, as this June NASA announced it would be opening the International Space Station to tourists in 2020. Now in business, European stock markets are trading lower over Brexit uncertainty, and investors are being cautious after the latest escalation in the trade war between the United States and China. The British pound has fallen to its lowest level against the dollar since January 2017. Fears of a snap election in Britain did not spare the euro either. It slid to a 28-month low against the dollar on expectations of further interest rate cuts in the eurozone. Now it's 35 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's the news for now, but do stay tuned for further updates on Indus News. Bye-bye.